Okay, let's now just be in the mood. I think we're in the mood now because he's here. Julian, welcome along, Julian. Julian is an LUT. He's from Reflections of Truth and he's from the Unity National School. He's on the council and he's a very busy man, but he's taken time out today for us. Thank you, Julian. Welcome to Unity of Melbourne.
Thank you, Reverend Bill. I appreciate that, and lovely to see everybody online this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. It's interesting with the situation that happened with Rath. I do the IT for Unity Reflections of Truth normally as well, and what came to mind when I was seeing how calmly he tried to solve the issues that were going on. I know that possibly somewhat that he was a bit like a duck on a pond. So it looked good on the top, but I would imagine the machinations underneath were going quite wild. And that reminded me of, remember back in the, I guess the 70s and 80s, there used to be a t-shirt came out and the t-shirt had an emoji on it of a frowning face. And underneath the emoji, it had the words bleep happens. I'm not going to say the word. I don't know whether you guys remember that at all. But quite a few years ago, probably early mid 90s, I saw t-shirts suddenly coming out and the emoji face had changed to a smile. And underneath it said, change happens. And that's sort of what really happens to us is that change happens, whether we recognize it, whether we understand it, whether we acknowledge it, and whether we move through it. So it's an old saying that the most constant thing in life is change. And the question I've got for you is do you want the change and do you get the choice to change? So some events have happened to me. Some of you know me and some of you don't. So I will go through this and bore those that do know me. But I have a 24, nearly 25-year-old son called Sam. And about 4 or 5 years ago, Sam decided that Canada was a place he wanted to go and investigate. He wanted to move over to Canada, have a look around, see what it was about. And he just had this real calling to go to Canada. However, due to a variety of events, one of which was that he spent a large percentage of the last few years unemployed, which means he couldn't save money. It was a bit of a challenge. And then he finally got himself a brand new job and he started really saving. And just before Christmas, he declared that in probably July, August of this year, he'll have enough funds behind him to be able to go to Canada. Which I'm thrilled about. I think it's a good move for him to go overseas. I think he'll get a lot of growth and a lot of expansion of his understanding of how the world works. So I have no qualms about him going. And of course, that brought up my memories of my time in Canada because I spent probably 8 or 9 months living in Canada. And there's a couple of things I want to talk about that happened at that time. The first one was that coming from Australia, I really got to see the leaves do their changing of color. Sort of the areas I grew up, we had normal gum trees. We had trees that didn't lose their leaves. We had trees that didn't change color. Spring, different story, of course. The flowers all come out in spring and the trees all change colors and it's all beautiful. But it was really interesting to see those beautiful reds, those beautiful oranges and the trees doing their thing. And also the fact that, after a period of time, the leaves of the trees were bare and there was nothing on the trees. But then as spring started to, push forward, you started to see these flecks of green starting to sprout from around the trees. And as a kid growing up in Australia, I just found that absolutely amazing to watch. And the Canadians looked at me like I was weird. The other thing that happened in Canada was I was actually there attending a fairly detailed spiritual program based on the Unity 12 powers and the Unity 12 powers as a tool for change. So unfortunately, not unfortunately, because I think it's a fortunate situation that happened, but basically I developed a fairly good understanding and likeness to alcohol. And that caused a wide variety of issues. And so in 1993, I went into a treatment program in Canada. And then I stayed there and worked on the backup staff for over, like I say, about 8 or 9 months. And what was amazing about that experience, apart from my own recovery and my own change and the change of my understanding that I actually was a child of God and that that spirit as a whole loves me, was watching other people go through that change, watching other people get an understanding that, hey, my old pattern, my old way of being, my old way of being no longer needs to be in control of me. I can change. So, asking the question, do you want change with that? It's a really important question to ask yourself. Now, this program used the 12 powers, and it used the fact that we can use the 12 powers in a variety of ways to do that. And we can use the 12 powers to move ourselves forward or through change. One of the things that also they taught at that program was also about the fact that visualization is a really important part of understanding change. So if change is happening to you, understanding that we have the power over our own minds to choose how that change unfurls. Now, there are events, circumstances, and situations within that change that we may not have control over, but we do certainly have we do have control over how we perceive the change moving forward. Mahatma Gandhi said, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." And that happens when we're talking about internal change and external change. We need to, or a tool or an option that you have available to you when going through change is to visualize how that change is going to result. Now, I don't mean projecting. I don't mean, oh, this is the way it must happen. Obviously, we have to understand that there is a divine process in place, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but there is a divine pattern to how change happens. And part of that divine pattern is us visualizing that whatever the change is, it is for the highest good for all. So that means that whatever happens is for the highest good, and that we must enfold ourselves in the change and unfurl that change as part of our spiritual growth process. George Bernard Shaw stated, "Progress is impossible without change. Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything." And we teach that at Unity, is our thoughts are things. We use our thoughts and we use our minds proactively as opposed to reactively. So again, using change as that option, using our thought processes and changing our thoughts and looking at what thoughts are coming up when we're going through change is an aspect of how we understand how we can use those thoughts, either by creating new thoughts that we prefer or building more thoughts along the lines of the thoughts we're currently having. So what I mean by that is that if you're having a negative thought about the change, you can then make the decision there and then to go, oh, no, I no longer want to have that in my life. I will create a denial and an affirmation that will then allow me to change my thoughts. I'll find the new thought I want, and then I will continue using those thoughts moving forward. So progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said, "If you do not change direction, you may end up where you're heading." Now, I don't know about you lot, but some of the thoughts I have is not a place I want to end up ever. I don't know, we have those automatic thoughts that come from who knows where. I had, like I say, I had 33 years of life living one way, and then I found a new way to live, and I've tried to be learning to live that way since then. But trust me, some of those thoughts from the first 33 years pop up every now and then. And so if I concentrate and if I keep my eye, or if I focus on those thoughts, then exactly, if I don't change the direction of my thoughts, I'll end up I'll end up where I'm heading with the original thought. And so it's really understanding that we need to look at that. The philosopher, or the ancient historian Heraclitus, said, "There is nothing permanent except change." For years and years and years, I've heard the old terminology: the only thing you can rely on in life is death and taxes. And they're the only constants, but change is permanently constant, which is an interesting way to think about change. And one of the aspects of understanding how permanent change really is that when we talk about our bodies, let's talk physically about our bodies. I've read different articles on this, so I can be corrected on this, but on average, every cell in our body is rebuilt and rechanged and renewed over a 7-year period. So in fact, the body you had 8 years ago is not the same body you physically have today. The cells die off, cells regrow. It's a process that our body is constantly going through, which is why when we concentrate on our health and we concentrate on wanting to change ourselves at cellular level, that's completely possible, because the body's doing it already. We just have to tap into it. So there is nothing permanent except change, because it's constantly happening. Look at the changes that we've gone through in the last 10 years. Look at the changes that have happened in the last 20 years. Life is always moving forward, is always changing. I like what Leo Tolstoy said. Tolstoy said that everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself or themselves. And it's interesting, I work in a large office. I work for the federal government, and I work in a large office, and it's amazing to watch something simple as the reaction people have to recycling in an office. So, you've got a lot of people in the office. We have somewhere between 30 and 50 people at any given time. We have with one of the upsides, let's talk about the upsides to COVID, was just that the Australian federal government realised that work from home actually worked. And so now staff members can work 2 days a week from home, and they can work 3 days a week from the office. And it's actually made us a more efficient, more capable from a functional point of view. But it's really interesting watching those people, the wide variety of people, and how they react to the simple process of recycling, because we've instigated a recycling process where there are no rubbish bins at our desks. You have to take all your rubbish out to the kitchen, and you have 4 rubbish bins that you have to put them in according to what the product is. And, you talk to people about, yep, we want to change the world. We hate the fact that there's all this rubbish everywhere. But then you watch them put their plastics into the wrong bin, or you see them, not doing what is expected and what is required of them for a more sustainable environment. So a lot of people think about changing the world, but they don't often think about changing themselves. Now, one of the things I love about Unity people, and I've been around Unity a long time. For some of you that don't know, that Grace Online is my mother, and Grace has been a Unity minister since 1978. And she, in fact, discovered Unity through Unity of Hawaii in Honolulu when we lived there, when I attended my 11th birthday in Honolulu, when I used to go to the Unity Sunday School at the big church in Hawaii. So we've been around Unity a long time. And one of the things I really like about Unity is that a lot of the people are willing to change, willing to look at stuff and looking at themselves and seeing how, if they work on themselves, if they work on changing themselves, then change happens. as the t-shirt says. So do you want change with that? That's the question you've got to keep asking yourself is that, am I happy with what's going on, or do I want change with that? And am I prepared then to do what needs to be done to do the change? Am I prepared to do the inner work, and looking at the shadow work, looking at the stuff behind the stuff? Am I willing to look at that stuff to change, so that if I change, I can be a part of the change that happens within the world? So one of the understandings, or one of the things that needs to happen with changes, is you kind of need to know what is it you want to change. What does need to change? What am I not happy with? What am I not comfortable with? What circumstances? What is the universe showing me that needs to change? Sometimes the information comes from the outer, not so much from the inner. In Paul Hasselbeck's book, Heart-Centered Metaphysics, he talks about the threefold nature of humankind. And the threefold nature of humankind is that awareness or questions arise in three areas. And we process those questions of whatever it is that we're looking at in three areas of our being. The first, of course, is via the body. We have five senses. We have five senses that tell us things that are going on. So if something in our body makes us aware of something that we are looking at, and that brings up a question of, oh, what do I need to do with that information? The body uses the senses for that to happen. So for argument's sake, giving you a really simple analogy of that, quite a few years ago, I developed lower back pain, quite chronic lower back pain. I was in quite a lot of pain for a long time. And I went to doctors and I did the standard stuff. I'm not frightened of going to doctors and having the doctors do a scan. And they gave me the terminology degenerative disc disorder. Now, what that actually means is we have no clue what's going on, but you've got pain in your lower back. And that's about it. They couldn't, without going into too much, without actually doing an operation and opening up and having a good look, which I was not going to do. They basically said, yeah, you've got this problem going on. Now, at that time, I wasn't a licensed Unity teacher. I wasn't even looking at that, but I did spend some time with some Unity folk, including Reverend Rhonda Murray up in Brisbane. And she said, well, quite commonly it's known that that area of the body means that you're feeling unsupported somewhere, because the base of the spine supports the rest of the spine, which supports the rest of you. Where are you feeling unsupported? Now, at that time, I was feeling really unsupported in my job. The job I was doing, I did not like. It was a struggle to go to work every day. I would sit in the car park going, I only have 8 hours to go. I can get through this. And that was where I was at. So I was feeling really unsupported because I worked with a manager who refused to help change things, and also blamed everybody else for the problems that were going on in the office. So I felt really unsupported. So I did some denials and affirmations about the fact that the universe actually supports me and that I'm supported. I don't need my manager to support me. I don't need my job to support me. I am supported by the universe. Now, my lower back still may have aches and pains every now and then, but it's nowhere near what it was. And it was a way of me looking internally and going, well, what else is going on that may be bringing this up? So the body does that. Another way of processing change or processing information is via the mind, via our intellect and reason. And that's often where we mostly deal with change. We go, okay, I need to change this. I need to change that. I'm helping a friend at the moment. She needs to move house. She's been living with her elderly mother, and her elderly mother is going into an aged care facility. And I don't know about you in Melbourne, but up here in Brisbane, our rental market has gone through the roof, and it's just crazy out there at the moment. And so she's going through that. So I'm helping her by giving her suggestions about how she can manifest the right place at the right time for when she needs it. However, she's using her intellect. She's constantly on realestate.com, looking at properties, assessing properties, looking at where she can live, looking at the size of places. And she's using her intellect. And she's also using her reasoning power of being able to go, okay, well, this is what I need for this, and this is what I need for this, and various other things. So she's using her mind to answer the question. And then the third way is we do it through spirit. We do it through our intuition and our inspiration. Sometimes when we're dealing with questions that arise about change, suddenly we get an intuitive idea or we'll get an inspiration somewhere and we'll go, where did that come from? Well, it came from spirit. It came from divine mind. Divine mind is the holding place for all divine ideas, and divine mind has the answer to every situation and every circumstance. So in heart-centered metaphysics, Paul states we must activate all three realms by concentrating on each of them. You have to concentrate on your body and what it's telling you. You have to listen to your mind and say, what is it telling me? Do I accept what it's telling me, or do I change what it's telling me? And you have to spend time in the silence connecting with spirit, listening to your intuition, understanding how your intuition is telling you which way to go and what to do. So for me, the real key point to understanding of do you want change with that is the assessment process, looking at what's going on, the what and how of that change process and what's going on. Now, as Paul says in the threefold nature of humankind, he puts them in body, mind, and spirit, but the reality of it is we need to use them the opposite way around. We need to get in touch with spirit. We then need to use our mind to affirm and to move forward with what spirit brings. And as the Quakers say, once you first pray, then put your foot forward. Do some action, do something positive towards the change that you're looking at implementing, whether it's a change of behavior, in which case you need to change what you do about that behavior, whether it's a change of mind. Do you need to journal? Do you need to do something about it? So putting your body into action as well. What are the stumbling blocks to change? Well, there's a couple of stumbling blocks that Paul talks about in Heart-Centered Metaphysics. It's in chapter 28, which is titled Stumbling Blocks and Keys to Demonstration, Fear, Lack, and the Negative Side. And the two areas that really helped me with understanding how I block change is through the understanding of resistance and non-resistance. In Heart-Centered Metaphysics, he states, quoted from an article that was written by, or it was an article that was written, but it was from a talk that Charles Fillmore did. And Charles said the greatest disintegration in the human consciousness is resistance. Really hear what he's saying there. The greatest disintegration in the human consciousness is resistance. One of my favorite denials is I give no power to the sense of separation. I give no power to the sense of separation, because I can't be separate. I can't be there, but what I can do is I can think I'm separate. And so learning to understand the difference between resistance and non-resistance. Now, non-resistance is not just giving up. It's, as I said earlier, it's about allowing the flow to happen for the highest good of all, moving through something and allowing that to happen. The other big challenge, or the other big block to demonstrating, what we're looking for, is that is unforgiveness and forgiveness. For those of you that have been around Unity a long time, you know that when we say the word sin, what we really mean is error thought. It's an archery term that was used, meaning missing the bullseye. So on a target, missing the part that, the bullseye. So from Christian healing, the Fillmore state, the forgiveness of sin or error thought is an erasure of mortal thought from consciousness. So what they mean by that, or how I interpret that is that we sin when we stay stuck in those negative human-based thoughts that are not spirit-led, if that makes sense. So understanding that we have the ability to change our thoughts, but if we stay stuck in the old thoughts, then that's when we're missing the mark. So these are just a couple of things that I've, thought of when I think about change. And these are actions that I've thought of that I use to help me with change. The question you've always got to ask yourself is do I want change with that? Is this something that is no longer serving me? And do I want change with that? And if your answer is yes, then you need to do the work that needs to be done to make the change. So to finish off, being aware of the change through your senses, through your body, using your intellect and your reason, and then connecting with spirit and asking spirit, do I want change with that? And then waiting for the answer to occur. Remember, the only question you need to ask is, do I want change with that? And if the answer is yes, then you know what to do. Thank you.
Would you thank Julian? Wow, very solid talk and food for thought. That'll keep us busy during the week. Well done, Julian. It's really a pleasure to have you with us, and we hope we see you a bit more often in 2023.